All right, we are now recording, so we'll go ahead and get started. The first thing I will do is drop in the PDF of our bios for our panelists, just so you guys have them for the students that are on with us today. And then Manny, I will get you a copy of this to be able to share out with teachers for anyone who's joining us after the fact with the recording. So today we are joined by three scientists. I'll start with, my name's Amanda Lim. I'm the Education Outreach Specialist here at TGEN. TGEN stands for Translational Genomics Research Institute. Basically, we're a nonprofit research institute located in downtown Phoenix that specializes in genomic research. That's not limited to just DNA. We focus on RNA and protein. And what we're really focused on is trying to move from bench to bedside, focusing on personalized medicine and making sure that the work we're doing in the labs is making its way to the patients and those who need care when it comes to certain diseases like cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, metabolic disorders, just to name a few. Today we're joined by three of our scientists. I'm going to give them just a quick name introduction, and then we're going to hop into the questions for the panel today, because they're going to tell us more about themselves as we go about this panel discussion. So we have with us Austin Gutierrez. He has a Bachelor's of Science, and he is in the Banovich lab, and he's a bioinformatician here at TGEN. Then we have Elizabeth Hutchins, Dr. Elizabeth Hutchins. She has her PhD from Arizona State University. She's joining us as a computational scientist and has been in the Jensen lab for a number of years here at TGEN. And then last but not least, we have Jose Victorino, Dr. Jose Victorino. He joins us from the Sharma lab. Am I correct on that, Jose? And he's focused on his postdoctoral research here at TGEN. Jose, did I get the right lab?
No, I'm in Dr. Perot's lab.
You're in Dr. Perot's lab. And he's in the proteomics division in Dr. Perot's lab. Sorry about that. So these are our three scientists that will be with us today, and we're going to go ahead and hop into the questions. And in no specific order, you guys just kind of jump in and answer the questions as you want. Our first question is, tell me about yourself and your educational journey and how it's led to where you are now.
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. I'm Jose, and I was actually born in Mexico, and I moved to Chicago when I was 2, and then I moved to California when I was 8. And I always had a strong pull towards the STEM fields. I was always really good at math. Or that was very easy for me to see that I was good at math. And so I was always kind of into the science field. I thought I was going to be an engineer originally, mostly because I thought it was kind of like a more manly degree. But eventually I actually switched to biology because I actually was much more interested in the science aspect of biology than the engineering aspect, or the science aspect of engineering. And I actually ended up doing a PhD instead, even though I never thought I'd do a PhD. So I guess that's kind of my educational journey in a summary.
I'm in a standoff with Elizabeth right now, but I guess I'll go next. So I'm Austin. I'm 24 years old. I just turned 24, and I'm an Arizona native. So I went to grade school, high school, and college here in Arizona. And so I got my bachelor's degree at Arizona State University in biomedical informatics. And that's a brand new program at ASU for bachelor students. Normally it's offered as a master's degree. So we were like the first graduating class with that degree. So it's a little scary at first knowing like what kind of jobs you could get with a degree that hasn't really existed before. But I think it opened up a lot of doors for me, especially at TGEN and in the scientific field here. So, and I've always kind of lean more towards the STEM field. I like to understand how things work. And if I don't understand how something works, it kind of makes me uncomfortable. And that's just like how my weird brain works. But I think it's helped me a lot in finding new opportunities like the Helios Scholar internship, which is how I got my start at TGEN. And I entered there in the summer of 2017. And then I stayed on as an academic intern for the next 2 years. And then I was fortunate enough to be offered a position as a bioinformatician straight out of college. So that's just my short little journey. And now I'm just a budding little scientist, I guess, with no PhD. So I guess that's the next step for me.
You're still a scientist. So I'm also an Arizona native. I went to school, grew up and went to school here. And I was really drawn towards biology and chemistry in high school. And so I studied biochemistry at ASU. I am also a musician. I play the violin. So I double majored in biochemistry and music for my undergrad. And then I discovered that I still liked biology and chemistry a lot, but I didn't like biochemistry. And that's not where I wanted to end up. So for graduate school, my PhD is in molecular and cellular biology. But I'm really interested in genetics and genomics. So ASU didn't have a genetics PhD per se. So I found a graduate advisor that studied in Eric Lander's lab. He worked on the Human Genome Project at MIT. And so my graduate advisor had a very strong background in genetics and genomics. And so I was able to get that training in my PhD. I studied lizard tail regeneration. So all the genes that are activated when lizards regenerate their tails. And I started on the wet lab. So all my experience as an undergrad was pipetting and doing that sort of work. I also did a Helios internship in 2009 and really liked TGEN. And then during graduate school, I found out that in genetics and genomics, a lot of the work really is on the computational side with bioinformatics. And I didn't have anyone else to analyze my data. And so I kind of learned trial by fire to switch over to the computational side during graduate school. And I loved it. So one thing about graduate school is it's a good time to kind of try out different things that you're interested in and just get that training and then decide where you want to focus. So when I went for my postdoc, I knew I had that strong genetics, genomics interest, and I wanted to stay on the computational side. And I knew about the work that people had done at TGEN from my Helios internship prior. So I applied for a postdoctoral position at TGEN in Kendall Jensen's lab, and in the neurogenomics division. And that way I would get more training with working with hundreds and thousands of human samples and really get more of the computational skills. And then I like working in that lab so much, I stayed on, and I am currently a computational scientist there.
Great. Thank you guys for that overview of your education. I'm going to ask one follow-up question to that. So we've got good representation. We have the proteomics division. We have Austin, who's in the Banovich lab, and Dr. Banovich focuses a lot on cancer. And then we have Dr. Hutchins that focuses on neurodegeneration with Dr. Jensen. So I would love to hear what each of you guys are doing in your own specific divisions. And I'll make it easier. Austin, you get to go first.
Okay, that makes it a lot easier. So in the Banovich lab, we have two main projects. One is on a rare and incurable lung disease called idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. And the only cure for it, or cure, is a full lung transplant, which is not an option for most patients that are older and elderly. They can't survive that. So it's like just a terrible disease. Your lungs turn to scar tissue over time and you eventually can't breathe and suffocate. So really glad to be working on a project like that because it has real world implications, especially with COVID-19 and like the lung damage models that are coming out of that. And our second project is on developing CAR T cell therapy for glioblastoma, which is a brain cancer. I believe it's the same one that killed John McCain a few years back, unfortunately. But so we're using single cell RNA sequencing technologies to analyze these diseases at a very high resolution to get a good idea and good understanding of what's driving these disease processes.
Great. Jose, would you like to tell us what you're doing in Dr. Perot's lab in the proteomics division?
Sure. So our lab is the proteomics division, and actually their proteomics cores are not very common. Not many places have them, and so the fact that TGEN, that's not like a large university, has a core is actually really cool and interesting, and shows their devotion to kind of the forefront of medical sciences. And so basically, the difference between genomics and proteomics is genomics, they're looking at DNA, they're looking at RNA. So that's kind of the stuff before the proteins, but we're looking at the real proteins, the real worker bees. So kind of the stuff we're doing in our lab kind of is, we kind of have our hand in every single lab. We work with every single lab because everyone needs to look at proteins, and the proteomics core is the only place that can do that. And so we don't really focus on one particular disease or project. We work on pretty much all of them, including projects from outside of TGEN. People send in their samples to us, and we analyze them to see what they have and help them in their projects. And my project in particular that what I was kind of hired to do is looking at extracellular vesicles, which are basically like these little tiny organelles that all of our cells secrete and go throughout our entire body. And so we're trying to be able to get those and analyze them to be able to find whether or not people have disease just from these little organelles that are floating through our bodies, like biomarkers. And so we'd like, the main goal is to be able to identify if people have cancer early on, so that since cancer is such a devastating disease, if we can catch it early, people are much more likely to survive. And so if we can find whether or not people have cancer just from them peeing in a cup, that's kind of the ultimate goal of the project that I have.
And I also work with extracellular vesicles, but more on the neuro side. So if you want to study the brain, you can't go take a brain biopsy of a human. So my graduate work, you can work in lizards, you can work in animal models, but when you want to work on the human side, one thing that you can take is biofluids. So we look at blood, plasma, urine, saliva, cerebral spinal fluid, and look at the extracellular vesicles that are found in these fluids. And kind of a similar approach to Jose, we want to get an idea if we can detect disease messages that are in these biofluids early on. So one of my big projects is with Parkinson's disease, and we work with the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And there's a larger project with accelerated medical partnerships in Parkinson's disease, and that's with the NIH. And so what they do is they bring together the NIH and nonprofit organizations like the Michael J. Fox Foundation and pharmaceutical companies. and everyone works together to try to get the research and the work out faster. So we have, for that project, we have nearly 10,000 samples from exact number 3,000 or 4,000 participants over time. And so we worked with the Google biological company Verily to process all that data in the cloud. So it's been kind of an interesting project to see all those groups of people work together, and all of that is for biomarker discovery and trying to detect the progression of Parkinson's, and also look at people that have some Parkinson's like what's the word I'm thinking of? Like prodromal disease. They have some aspects. They don't have the motor Parkinson's, but they have some non-motor Parkinson's symptoms, but they don't have, they haven't been diagnosed with Parkinson's yet. And so that would allow us to target that population of people and really get them medicines earlier on.
Great, thank you all for that. I know for the students who might be watching later, as well as students now, there might be some big words or some things that you might have gotten lost on. But I wanted you to kind of hear the variation in the science we have. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to follow up with me, and I can farm that out to our scientists here today if you want to know a little bit more about what they're doing specifically. I'm going to dive back into kind of how they got to where they are now. So the next question I want to ask is, where did you first know, or when did you first know that you wanted to be in this current field? So thinking about the work you just described to us. And we'll go ahead and start with Elizabeth this time.
So I had a general interest in science, like I said before, but I wasn't sure exactly where I wanted to end up. And it kind of organically grew, I guess, as I took more classes in college, and I found out where my interests were. Like I said, I originally thought that biochemistry would be this great combination of biology and chemistry. And then I didn't really like it, but I really liked genetics and genomics and wanted to go further down that track. And then in graduate school, I really liked working with lizards and regeneration. But I felt somewhat limited working in an animal model, and I wanted to be closer to having an impact to patients. And so that's one of the reasons I really sought out a position at TGEN, where we have that bench to bedside goal.
Great. Jose?
Yeah, so like I said, I thought I was going to be an engineer at first. I went to undergraduate for 2 years for aerospace engineering, and I eventually switched over to biology. And that was, it's, to me, I was kind of, I got kind of tired of the engineering classes, or I guess bored. It seemed to me like it was just a bunch of equations over and over again, and then flipping them around to get the right answer. It just wasn't very interesting to me anymore. And so I started taking biology classes. And I think like, I think Austin, I forgot.
We lost Jose. Hopefully he'll be back in just
no.
a minute. We'll go ahead and let Austin hop in, and then if Jose
Okay.
comes back, we'll let him finish.
So I can't, it's hard to pinpoint it on like one exact moment where I knew for sure this is what I wanted to do, but I've kind of always gravitated towards like just biology in general, just because I always thought it was so fascinating. And same with like computers. I've always been good with like computers and programming. And so when I found this like degree program, it like it's like half biology and half computer science, and you merge them together. And then you could use both of those together to solve really hard problems and make discoveries and diseases and impact real world people and problems. And so once I started my internship at Helios, that really kind of solidified, like, okay, this is kind of what I want to do. This is a really good fit for me. And yeah, that's about it.
Great. Well, it seems like our individuals here today have found their fit here at TGEN, but was there a time where you felt that you didn't belong in your field? If so, how did you get past that? And Elizabeth, do you want to go first again?
Yeah, so if you haven't heard of imposter syndrome, it's this idea, and I'm not a psychologist, but that you're actually very capable of what you're doing, but you feel like, you know, everyone else in your field knows what they're doing and you're the only one that has no idea. And I think especially with throughout my PhD, where you're always questioning what you're doing and are you doing it properly and is your training good? I have struggled on and off throughout my career with imposter syndrome for sure. Like, do I really belong here? I'm surrounded by all these smart people. And I think one thing that's helped me is sometimes to just sit back and reflect and like write down all the things that you've done on a piece of paper, even for the last year or throughout, you know, looking back at all of grad school for me or all of your undergrad, and just kind of writing down your accomplishments and things that you've done, and having a moment of personal reflection and saying, oh, hey, I do belong here. I am accomplished. I've done all these things. Another thing that helps is having good mentorship, and that kind of alludes to another question I think Amanda has about having support people in your system that want to lift you up and want you to do well in your career.
Great. Austin, you want to go next?
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna reiterate what Elizabeth said about imposter syndrome because it's very real. I've felt, even now, don't feel like I'm qualified to call myself a scientist, even though I am now. But one of the things I like to do to remind myself is that, like, I'm gonna make mistakes, and as long as I learn from those mistakes and don't repeat them, then it's gonna be okay. And I also have really good mentors to help me out along the way. And I'm really fortunate for when I ask questions, I'm always having them explained to me in a detailed way. So having good mentors and learning from your mistakes is the best way to get past that.
Great. And then Jose, I think you're back on with us.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. Did you catch the question?
Yes. So for me, it was when I was in my undergrad, I started to do a research internship in someone's lab, and I was kind of thinking about what I would do in the future. I wasn't sure. I was weighing the options, and so I asked the professor, or I voiced my concern to the professor about a PhD. Is I just thought that my memory wasn't good enough, or I wasn't good enough for some reason. And then that professor was just very confident. It's like, oh yeah, you can do it. Just if you put your mind to it, you can get around any obstacles you have. And I think that was enough for me. So just kind of reiterates that having the good mentors, they are really important.
So I'm going to expand on that question a little bit. So we have a couple individuals who are minorities with us, or minorities technically in their field. Elizabeth, you're a great example for bioinformatics. Have you guys faced any struggles being a non-traditional individual within the space you're in? If so, kind of how did you get past them? Or were there things you just didn't experience in your education so far? Austin, do you want to go first?
So I don't think I've ever had any issues with this. I've always felt like, fortunately, I've felt like I've always kind of belonged in the space where I never felt like out of place or, like an odd one out. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have very much
No
to add
worries.
on to
How does it
that.
feel being in a field that's much newer? You alluded to that earlier with your bachelor's. How does that feel?
Yeah, I mean, it's a double-edged sword because it's really cool to be working on these cutting-edge technologies, but on the flip side, you're the like some of the first people to try to do these types of analysis. So you're on your own a lot. And so like there's no one else that I can like really ask for help because no one else has really tried to do these types of things before. So it's kind of like a trade-off, I guess. So you
And
have to be able to,
can you expand a
sorry.
little bit on what a bioinformatician is, kind of what you do
Yeah.
specifically that's
Yeah.
unique?
So my role is to use, we have a supercomputer at TGEN. It's basically like a cloud. If you know what a cloud is, it's like a big data center with hundreds and hundreds of computers. And it's my responsibility to program and tell these computers, hey, there's a big data set of, or a big dump of genomic data. Go load it, process it, analyze it, and then get it into like a workable format and then save it. And so I use very powerful computers to analyze really big data sets, essentially.
Great. Jose, do you want to touch on this question at all?
Yeah, can you just repeat the question again?
Yeah, have you faced any struggles being in the field due to being a minority in the field?
Yeah, I feel like I can answer that question if it was a little different. So it's not really. So if I would have done my PhD, I think in a different state, like California or maybe Arizona, I think I wouldn't have anything to add. So it's more of a like a difference in culture. So I did my PhD in Indiana, so it's a very different place, and I think that may have been more of an issue than the being my minority, just being from a different place that kind of has a different attitude and lifestyle. I think I had some problems, some issues working with some of the people there. Just kind of, they just kind of, I guess, saw me as the black sheep. They kind of always had to explain myself, always had to be extra careful about what I said. And so just, that was very hard. I think that was more hard than the actual classes or the work to me specifically, because I'm not very good at social interactions or communication. And so, yeah, that's kind of the problems I had. Just kind of had to work at it and then struggle through it.
Great. Thank you for touching on that. We know culture is a big thing in everything that we do. So thank you for touching on that. Elizabeth, do you want to add anything to this question before we go to the next one?
Yeah, sure. I have kind of an example I can share. But I've had more positive experiences than negative ones. I suppose it's more subtle. And I think as a woman on the computational side, there are a lot of women in biology, but not as much when you get more into programming and computational science and bioinformatics. And I think I just had a lot of people underestimate me. So it's more of a subtle thing than anything overt. But again, mentorship helps a lot. So to give an example, I had a project in graduate school, and this is after I had transitioned to doing computational analysis. And another lab member in the lab kept asking someone else about my project. And the other person would say, you know, ask her, it's her project. And so really what ended up happening is then I talked to my graduate advisor about it in private, and then he decided to have that person work on a different project and not work with me in that situation. And so that's how that was addressed. I think that's really important when you're in training to have mentors that are willing to stand up for you and speak out for you in situations like that, because when you're a student, you don't always feel like you have that power.
Great. So I think that's a great jumping off point into our next question. Obviously, support is key to get through those challenging times, no matter what's causing them. So did you guys have support people / persons that helped you in school, both thinking back to your younger years, maybe middle school and high school, and then those years in university? Austin, you want to go first?
Sure. I think that the biggest support I've gotten was from my professors at ASU. They really took the time to get to know you as a person, and like they'd encourage you and require you to go to their office hours sometimes. But you had like one-on-one discussions with them. You really got to know them as a person, and it felt more like they were like a person you can talk to instead of like a professor or teacher. And so that made me try a lot harder in their classes, and then they're more willing to like write letters of recommendations for me. And so like without those letters of recommendations, I don't think I would have been able to get my start here in the field. And so that was really supportive of them. And then my current mentors, even in the lab today, like Dr. Banovich, has really helped me come a long way from where I started. And I definitely wouldn't be where I am today without their mentorship.
Great. Elizabeth, do you want to touch on support networks?
Sure. Let's see, for different ones than just teachers, teachers are helpful too. I participated in Science Olympiad in high school, and so I got to know some of the teachers on kind of a better basis, because we did those extracurricular curricular. Oh my goodness, my words are all messed up. We did those extracurricular activities together, and so that was helpful as I was going to college and had people to talk to about what their backgrounds and thoughts were. And then really in undergrad, it was instrumental finding a lab to intern in and having a good environment. So my first lab, I worked with a postdoc, really good mentor, but the head of the lab actually had a very toxic lab environment. And so that was kind of eye-opening to me, in how important it was to have someone that you're working for, that you want to work with, that has a positive environment. And so I think I became even more discerning when I was looking for grad school and postdoc about the type of lab environment I would be in. And then my graduate advisor, it was an excellent mentor. And to give you an example, 5 years out from my PhD, he's still sending me emails every once in a while about my career and how it's going, and providing that support. But even like other support networks, I'm really close to my parents. They've been very helpful. My spouse has been, I got married during graduate school, and my spouse has been very supportive of my career. So that's really important to have as well. Pets, I have a dog. I joke that he helped me write my PhD. So that there are different types of support networks you could have too, like family and friends and pets for sure.
Thank you for that, Elizabeth. We all need our pets in our lives, especially right now. Jose, do you want to touch on this one?
Yeah, sure. I would say you really need to find support wherever you can, at all times. Like don't knock someone off. Someone could be in your class, and you may be shy or don't think that you'll get very much out of like being in that study group, but you might make connections somewhere, and it might lead you to exactly what you want. I know my wife was in a study group she wanted to be a dentist, but she was having a hard time getting dental experience. One of the kids in the study group's parents happened to be a dentist, and then she's asked her, "Okay, can I go shadow your mom?" And she was like, "Yeah, why not?" And from there, she got a wonderful letter of recommendation. She got into the dental school she wanted to go, and it was great. And just kind of anyone really, your parents, obviously, your friends. I think the biggest one, most necessary, is kind of not just teachers, but teachers or professors who are kind of the leaders of some sort of group that you could be a part of, uh, um, the research is a good one. Having some sort of research internships, those are gold, really, because those people will, like they said, will check back on you, will give you letters of recommendation, and that's how you really get to go places. Yeah.
Great. So I think that was all a bunch of really good information so far. We'll go ahead and go to the last question I have is, what piece of advice would you give to a student in middle school or high school about to pursue STEM education, or a career, wants to go towards a career in STEM? Jose, do you want to take this one first?
Sure. I guess my advice would be, I guess, kind of something that would have helped me, is don't knock off language arts. Yeah, like science and math and engineering, all of that is great, and those are definitely necessary. You need the grades, you need the degree to get a job, or to get the interview. I guess those are the things you need to get the interview. But then to get the job, you need to be able to talk about everything you know, and you need to be an effective communicator. You need to be able to write well. You need to be able to be friendly, and for people to like you. So also work on those aspects of your brain, and not just on the science and math. And yeah, that's my advice.
Great. Austin, would you like to go next? Little advice
Yeah.
from you.
I'd say probably the most important thing when you're pursuing STEM is to make sure that you actually enjoy it and you have a passion for it, because it's really common for people to be pushed by their parents to be forced into like a field like STEM or technology, and like they don't enjoy the work itself, and that could lead to a lot of burnout. So I would emphasize, if you have a passion for it, then yeah, go for it. It's going to be hard, it's going to be tough, but if you really enjoy it, you're likely gonna make it. So, and it'll really, I don't know how to say, like pay for itself. Like I'm not sure how to say it, but you get the idea, right?
Yeah, I think we get it, Austin. Thank you. And then Elizabeth, can we get some advice from you?
That was really good advice from both of you. I just add that internships can be really helpful to get an idea of what you like. So I did a few internships throughout my undergrad in slightly different types of labs, and got a good idea of what kind of lab I wanted to work in moving forward. And so that can be very helpful to get an idea if you actually like doing it or not, because sometimes you might like it in a classroom, but then when you are actually working in that area, you find out that you don't like it as much as maybe you thought.
I think that's a great piece of advice, Elizabeth. Getting hands-on with what you want to do is very different than learning about it in the classroom, for sure. On that note, we've kind of reached the end of the questions I have. I kind of want to open up to the few people who have joined us, or anyone from MESA. If you guys have any last follow-up questions you guys want to ask our scientists, this is your chance. You can either type them into the chat or hop off your mic and ask them.
I have a quick question. I noticed a lot of you guys are in like the biology major field. Do you guys deal a lot with engineers? I know Jose was saying that he wanted to be an engineer, and that's what I'm going for right now. But just reading through you guys' website, it looks so interesting, and all the technology that you guys use, to make all that happen. I'm sure you guys deal with some kind of engineers. Do you guys deal with that face-to-face interaction, like one-to-one, or is that more like down the line?
So personally, so in our lab we use a mass spectrometer, which is a marvelous and machine that's very complex, that we do not mess with very much. So we're more user of the machine or the instrument, and then when something happens, we call an engineer. So we do get we talk to them quite a bit. They come in and they work on it all day long, and then we kind of get feedback. But other than that, we just kind of clean the instrument, run kind of quality control checks, but we don't fix it ourselves. That's about as close as we get to the engineer. Yeah.
So that's for the proteomics division. Austin, you want to hop in?
Yeah, I think Elizabeth is probably going to say the same thing as me, but the bioinformaticians at TGEN, every week we meet with our high performance computing engineers, and they're the ones who like build and maintain the supercomputer. And so we have like a really good relationship with them, and we will ask them like to install software for us, or they'll let us know which computers will be under maintenance or what kind of storage availability we'll have, and if they can archive stuff for us. So we have a really good relationship with our HPC engineers, and we meet with them all the time.
And then I'll give another example too. I thought of both of those. Those are both really good examples. But one more from graduate school, because I worked with regeneration and tissues. And so there are a lot of bioengineers. So when I was in graduate school, we'd actually collaborate with people that are trying to look at how cells grow and in a 3D space. And so there's a whole area of biology and engineering that intersects as well. With tissue engineering, or also bioengineers that make devices like pacemakers or devices like that as well.
Great. So I
Just
think
wanted
you
to
guys,
say one more
yeah, go
thing.
ahead.
So there are labs that in the world or in the US that actually work on making these instruments. So that would be a combination of physics, engineering, chemistry, and biology all in one. So that might be I think that it's just a very versatile field of proteomics and mass spectrometry. So just throwing that in there.
And the sequencing machines that we work with as well, they have chemical dyes, and that's how that works. But then there's also the machine. One type works by camera. There's another type that works by a movie. There's another machine that's actually like little pores on something that's this big, and they have little pores like are one of the outside of the cell, and thread molecules through that and measure the physics and the actual electrical current. So yeah, instrumentation is a huge one.
Yeah, so I'll speak to that a little bit. So a couple of our individuals have mentioned that they are part of the Helios Scholars Program, and I know we have a couple community college students on with us. So I've popped in the link to that internship, and we do have biomedical engineers that come through this program, and we have labs that we collaborate offsite with that do work more in the bioengineering space, that 3D modeling, building apparatuses to do this type of work that Elizabeth, Jose, and Austin are talking about. But also working in the lab gives you the opportunity to engage with the engineers, and they come in to work on the equipment like many of our scientists have said. So feel free to look into any of that or ask more questions in the engineering space. There is a really big overlap between biology and engineering. It's just finding the space where that's happening. And then we had one question come in from the chat. What would you say to a student about why they should pursue a career in your field? So let's let Elizabeth go first on this one.
I really like, well, bigger picture part of it for me is I feel like I'm contributing something back to society, and I like what I'm doing at the same time. So the day-to-day nitty-gritty can get kind of repetitive or, you know, sometimes on any given day you have this feeling of like, oh, why am I doing this? I don't know what I'm doing. But for me, it's really rewarding having that idea, that bigger picture, and contributing to better patient care at the end of the day.
Great. Jose, would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it could be for a number of reasons. First one, you could be crazy. It could be like Austin said, I was going to talk about this earlier, but this is another chance to say it again. That he said he wanted to know how things worked, right? Well, to me, like knowing how machines work, it's kind of, you know, we already know how they work. You know, you put electricity here and it moves this way. But in biology, we have no idea how things work, and we'll never know probably. But we're just kind of, we're just hungry to know how it works. And if you're hungry to know how things work in your body, one of the most kind of a beautiful, elegant engineering designs, I would say, then that's another reason. Another reason is maybe you want to like create something that no one's ever created before, and stamp your name in history. You know, you want to be this rock star scientist that everyone knows, and you change the world in some way. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that.
Well, that reminds me, I meant to add.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Piggyback off of that. That I like being the first one to look at new data and trying to make meaning out of it. Like no one's seen it before, and there's this excitement in the novelty of that as well. Go ahead, Austin.
Austin, you want to add to that? I see you nodding your head.
Yeah. So I mean, just with the advances in technology and just like the last 10 years, it's opened up a lot of like opportunities for new discoveries. And like, if you're a student now, you might walk in here and look at a problem in a different way than anyone else has looked at it before. And it's very likely that you might make a big discovery in this field, because there's just so much like fruit hanging on the tree that you can grab from. So it's a really big opportunity.
Great. Do we have any other questions in our last few minutes? The engineering one was a great one. All right, fantastic. So we have reached the end of this. I will pop in my email address. So if anyone has any questions or being shy, you are welcome to send them to me. I can forward them to any of our scientists with us today. I want to give a big thank you to Austin, Elizabeth, and Jose for joining us today and sharing your guys' experience. It's all unique, and I'm hoping it will influence students as they pursue a career in STEM. So thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.